Hey, hello everyone, and welcome to the first step in learning to make beautiful web pages. By now, I believe you are conversant with HTML, and you must have built some really boring stuff. But now it's time to actually make the boring interesting with CSS. By the end of this course, you'll be able to have a firm grasp of what CSS is, and by the end of this lesson you will be able to understand what the CSS syntax and selectors are, and you can actually write your own. Then you'll be able to create CSS files and include them in your HTML document. You'll be able to write a multiple declaration block and comments. CSS stands for Cascading Style Sheets. It describes the display of the HTML elements. It tells how web pages, including their design and layouts, should be displayed on different devices. CSS provided an easy way to design and manage the designs of the web pages, as HTML could not effectively be used. Before CSS, designing of web pages were done on HTML document. This was a long and expensive process in building large web pages. So the World Wide Web Consortium created CSS to the rescue. CSS eliminated style formatting from HTML. This saved a lot of work, as you can adjust and change the look of an entire website by making changes to just one file. Before we talk about CSS syntax, let us define syntax a bit. The syntax of a programming language is simply the set of rules for writing that particular language. The syntax for CSS consists of a selector and a declaration block. The selector signifies the HTML element you want to style. The declaration block contains one or more declaration separated by a semicolon and surrounded by curly braces. The declaration contains a property and a value. The property of the selector that you would like to change or design, and the value indicates the style that you want to give the property of the selector. To really explain this concept, let us go over to our VS Code for some demonstration. So here in my VS Code, I have a project opened up called a project folder called Intro to CSS. So here I'll create a file which I'll call intro.html. So I'll have my shifts in this and then enter. So here I'll just open up I'll put a p tag, and I'll just call it introduction. So let's just call it introduction to CSS. So there we have it. So here so for this example, we'll be using what we call the embedded style sheet, the embedded style. So you get to understand that as we go on, but for now let's just use it in our demonstration. So we have our style tag here, and then we do this. So we do this and we have this. So the first thing we want to do is we have our p tag, which is the selector that we would like to change. And then we have our curly braces. So in here, let's say I give a background color. So thankfully VS Code has the auto completion functionality in it. So let's just say yellow, and Here's my semicolon, and I have the color. This adjusts, changes the text to, so let's put the text to white. So P, as we have said earlier, is the selector that you'd like to change. The background color and the color are the properties of the P tag that you'd like to change. Then other property you would like to look at is the font size. So that will change the font size of your text. So yellow and white signifies the value given to the properties. They signify the way you want the properties to be designed. This example we just showed here signifies a multiple declaration block separated by a semicolon. So before we'll look at what a single block looks like, let's just check this out in our browser. So first we'll save, and then we'll copy path. So here in our browser, we'll paste the path and click on enter, and so we can see our change, what we did. So back here in our VS Code, right, a single declaration block will look like this. So this is it. So we have this, and we have yellow, right? So this is a single declaration block. Next, we want to look at how to add CSS to our HTML document. There are three ways to include your CSS into your HTML document, and they include the inline CSS, the internal CSS, and the external CSS. So the inline CSS is an inline style that is used to apply a unique style to a particular HTML element. So let's go over to our VS Code for a demonstration. So here in my VS Code, I have another P tag open. I think we should just use, say, H3 and H3 here. So say I wanted to design this particular HTML element. So you first put in the style attribute, and say we wanted to deal with the font size. And let's stick it to 10 pixel, or say let's make it 30. So now we have applied the font size to this specific element. Here in our browser, we reload. Okay, nothing shows. So we'll have to go back to our VS Code to see where we've missed it. So here in our VS Code, we can see this circle indicates that we didn't save our work. So Control S. And back here in our browser, we reload, and there we have that. As stated earlier, this is not an ideal way to design your HTML document, as it can get cumbersome as your document expands. Next, we want to look at the internal CSS, or the internal style sheet. It can be used when a particular HTML document has a special style. It is also called the embedded style sheet. The internal style is created using the style element inside the head section of your HTML. Then we add our styles in between the style tags, just as we've seen in the first demonstration. But let's go over to our VS Code to really understand it better. So here I am going to make this a comment. Remember your HTML comment, or you could just, for VS Code, you could use the shortcut for comment, which is Ctrl/, and that has made it a comment. So this is how it is written. But to make your code readable, so we're going to rewrite this again. And so we have P, and we have this, and we have our background color, to be yellow, and then we have this. So we enter this, so because it's a multi-line declaration, I have this. So I have my color. This is how your styles should be written for easy readability of your code. Now this, compared to this I believe is way neater. Or when writing, you could do something like this, and you have this, and you press enter. See that? So we put in our background color, and then we have this, and then we have yellow, and then we do this, and then the next line, and then we have color, and we have white. So the habit of writing it this way works. You pick your element, you put your curly braces, and then you press enter to separate the curly braces, and then you put in your properties and their values. So we're just going to clean this off. There we have it. The disadvantage of this kind of style sheet is that it cannot be reused. It is specific to the HTML page that you use it for. The external style sheet involves creating a separate file for the CSS styles. You could control the look of your entire website by making changes to just one file. To use an external style sheet in an HTML page, the HTML page has to contain a reference to the style sheet of interest. This is done in the head section of our HTML file. Before we go over to a demonstration, we need to understand that the major advantage of this method is that you can reuse the file for as many of your websites as you desire. Here in my VS Code, to create an external style sheet, you have this, and you have the intro. So to create an external style sheet, you use this .css extension. So there you have created a style sheet. It is good practice to put your CSS sheet, your CSS style sheet, in a folder, but we won't go into that right now. So I believe we have learned about file paths in HTML and how our folder structure affects the way our file path is written. In our case here, our style sheet is on the main file tree, so we don't need to specify a folder name before the style sheet. So to get this style sheet to show up here in our HTML document, so here in our document we have what we call the link rel, which is the style sheet. And then next we have the href, which is a hypertext reference. So the name of our document is intro.css. And so there we have it. So this is a reference. This is a reference to the style sheet that we want to use. So let's put in, say, an h4 tag. We have an h4 tag and we'll call it external style. So always remember to always save your work. So over here in our style sheet we have our h4, and remember to do this, and say we wanted to change the color to, say, blue, and then we have this. So we save, and then we go over to our VS Code to have a look, over to our browser, sorry. So over here in our browser we reload, and there we can see our h4 element. Now if the changes you made to your code, it doesn't show up on your browser, you need to be sure that you save, and you need to be sure that you have made the right reference, you've written the reference to the style sheet properly. So when it doesn't show up here, there's every likelihood that there's a problem with your link rel, that line of code. There is a problem with that line of code, this one. So imagine a situation where I have something like this. I save, and I come here and okay, so I make my change to green, right? So I have green. Don't forget to always save. So we save. So over here in my browser, when I reload that, okay, so it goes back to black. It's supposed to be green. And so you can, back here in my VS Code, the name of my style sheet is intro, but here I had missed an O. So you need to be careful when making references to your style sheet. So I'm going to correct that again, and there you have it. So we save, and then over here we save, and here in my browser I reload, and you can see it's now green. So now we want to look at comments. Comments are lines of code basically used to provide explanation inside a code file. In this case, your style sheet. This can prove helpful to you at a later date, or to another programmer who may need to look at your code, as it provides explanation to what you have done in the file. Comments are generally ignored by our browser. So here in my VS Code, say I wanted to give a bit of a comment about the code that I have written above. So you first of all start, you have your slash, and then your asterisk, and then the comment. Say the color, you can say the color of my text is green, and so we close that by having an asterisk and close it, and then you have a slash, and then you can see if we don't have this closing, it's assumed that everything after it is a comment. So don't forget to have that in your code. So we could have multiple lines of comments. You can have multi-lines and just write as much as you want. Just write stuff, more on colors later, and you could have so much like that. CSS units is used to determine the size of the property you are setting for an element or its content. For example, as you can see on the screen, we have the border of a p element set to 1 pixel. Here we set the property border of a paragraph with the value 1 pixel. The pixel is the CSS unit. In CSS, we have two categories of units, and they are absolute units and relative units. Absolute units are units that are fixed and remain the same size irrespective of the viewing window, which could be your phone, your laptop, or large desktop screen. What this means is that a property set with a value of an absolute unit will be the same size across all screen sizes, both on a phone or on a large screen monitor. Absolute units are used in web pages that do not require responsiveness. Absolute units are not advised for sites where responsiveness is required, as they do not scale when the screen sizes changes. Some of the examples we have: the pixel, the cm, the mm, which is a millimeter, and the in, which is the inches, and so on. Relative units, on the other hand, are useful when styling responsive web pages, as they scale relative to the viewing screen size. Some examples include percentage, em, rem, VW, and so on. I hope you had fun learning about CSS. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video.